So I stumbled across an interesting article based on a survey that was done by Nico. I'll have the link to the article down below. And it's basically talking about Final Fantasy and its popularity amongst Japanese students, which I think is fairly indicative of, Japanese youth and population as a whole. And they asked people if they'd ever played a Final Fantasy game. So that could be any game from the series, on any platform. And it was really actually quite surprising, especially for me. 70% of all of the students that were surveyed, I believe it's just over 400 people altogether, said that they had never played a Final Fantasy game. And obviously about 30% did say that they had done. It seemed to be that the reasons for why they had played it was because they'd had influences from family members, maybe older sibling that had played it, or friends had recommended it to them to play, and obviously new releases and reviews and all that sort of mumbo jumbo. And out of the 282, they asked them for their reasons as to why they'd not played it. So some of the reasons that some of the reasons that they gave, or some of the interesting ones, is about it not being a genre that they're interested in, that it doesn't look fun, never had any interest. Some of them were saying they're not allowed to play video games and are not interested in video games. So a proportion of that obviously will be people or students that don't have a hobby in video games. So I suppose it was always going to be squiffed more towards a no outcome rather than a yes. But it's just, I suppose what would be more pertinent is the people who have said that they don't actually have never played one, but are interested or have a pastime, a hobby in video games. So personally, I think part of what's to do with this is that the new, more modern Final Fantasies haven't been engaging enough to the Japanese audience. We've definitely seen that quite a bit from especially the newer versions. And I think I've made this case several times, but because they've sort of gone away from their roots slightly when, branding Final Fantasy off as a JRPG, which I know that they have seemed to have got further and further away from, that rhetoric. And a lot of people don't actually see it as that anymore. And they have admitted in the past that they have gone to target more of a Western audience. And the article clearly does show to me that they're missing out on what should be their bread and butter, their key demographic, people of college student age, and should be playing. I think it should be a lot higher. It should be perhaps the other way around, that they've not played it. As in 70% have played it and only 30% would have said no. So I'm a bit really surprised by that. I would like to see more Japanese people picking up Final Fantasy. I'd like them to have more of an influence over how Square Enix decides to brand and develop get their Final Fantasy games. First and foremost, I think Final Fantasy was better when it was originally developed for a Japanese audience. Of course, you could look at it the other way and say that obviously this includes any Final Fantasy game, and you could say that obviously the previous ones have not engaged them either, and they were developed primarily for a Japanese audience. I would say, I suppose you could argue that by saying that they are more there's a certain barrier that a lot of people face in taking a look and having a go at older games, especially with all the graphics and gameplay advancements that we have from, just any game, just sort of like the game that I'm showing right now, Homefront. There's the graphics obviously vastly superior to any of the old Final Fantasy ones. And if this is the sort of option they have of playing now, as opposed to, no offense, Final Fantasy VII, but I do love you, something that looks completely blocky and, fairly indistinguishable as to what certain things are. I mean, you're a bit hard pressed to try and tell me that they all look human. You've got to use your imagination a little bit. But not that that's ever been a problem. But I do think that if Square Enix moves further away, then it's probably going to we're probably going to see that this trend increase, and a lot more Japanese people will not have played Final Fantasy and may well not be interested in it. So, as I mentioned at the start of the video, if you want to read the article, you can do it. It's in the description below. And let me know what you guys think. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.